Very excited to be part of this forum. Amazing to capture important concerns and opportunities for those of us who are older. And so because I'm a professor, I love to give a title in my talks. I call this inflation anxiety. It's not just about the money. Talk about how we can understand and adjust to what seems to be the worst inflation that we've experienced in 40 years. I think the common sense of it all isn't something. So inflation anxiety, I'll be honest, I did not even realize how anxious I was about inflation until I started preparing this talk last month. And once I started to think in terms of anxiety and inflation, I realized it's something that I have. And it's not just worrying about the financial situation, although of course that's a big part of it. Inflation impacts our everyday lives, and it impacts the choices and decisions we have to make. And one of the things that's really hard about the impact inflation has is it makes us think about how we can make sacrifices. And it's never easy to make sacrifices. For some of these sacrifices, it's not just sacrifice so that you'll keep your budget. Sometimes it's a sacrifice that affects other people. So you may have wanted to do something with friends, you have to tell them you can't do it. You may have wanted to give something to your child, and you may have to say, hey, I can't give you that much. Now, when we think of inflation, I think inflation anxiety, we mostly think that inflation will impact those who are on fixed and tight incomes. And that's definitely the case. But I think inflation also makes people who are more secure also worry. So that even if you are in a relatively well-off position, you may be faced with having to cut down an area. Now, I'm going to give you two personal examples. I don't mean these to be frivolous, but so here's one example is that I'm a big coffee drinker. I drink 3 cups a day. I heard that drinking coffee is good for your cognitive functioning, and so I stopped feeling guilty about drinking coffee. But I've always been like an old style coffee drinker. I just order regular coffee with milk in it, nothing fancy. But this spring, for some reason, I decided to try a latte one day, and I really liked it. So I had a latte, and then decaf latte, and then a skinny latte, and then I tried a mochaccino and a cappuccino. And I think I'm one of these people who order these fancy coffee drinks that take time for the barista to make. But in October, when I was thinking about this talk, I realized the lattes I'm buying, I usually get them at Amazon, and they cost $5.40. I can have 3 of them a day, and there's tax, and then I get the 15% tip. So that's like $5 a day on lattes. And it turns out at Premier Moisson in my neighborhood, they have a morning special where if you buy a coffee, regular coffee is $1.15, and it's refillable. So I realized I'm spending $20 a day more that I have to on coffee. It's $600 a month. That's $7,000 a year, and that's just crazy. So I said, I got to stop this. I'm not going to order the lattes anymore. But I realized after a couple of weeks of that I missed my lattes, and what I decided to do is I only have lattes on weekends now, and I only have one a day. So, I think that's what many of us might decide to do is, we're going to make an adjustment, but not a gigantic adjustment. Okay, the other example I'll give is I've been very excited. I have a 21-year-old daughter who's in her second year at McGill, and she's found the career she wants to do. She wants to be a social worker. She likes working with the elderly. And she did an internship at Mount Sinai last summer. She really enjoyed it. And I've been so excited to see that she's kind of found a calling. And she's doing really well academically. And she even wants research, not a researcher. So several months ago, I said, Sophie, this is just wonderful. And anything you want to do in terms of getting a master's degree or a PhD, I just want you to know I'm going to be able to help you with that, or even take care of it. And you don't have to think local. You could think big. You could think of going to the U.S. You could think of Harvard, Stanford, whatever. So I told her that in the spring, and I wanted to have another talk there where I say, you remember that conversation I had with you, Sophie, where I said you can go anywhere? Well, I think I got carried away. And but this is what happens with the inflation. We want to be generous. We want to be trying new things, but can we really do it? Now, how do we cope? What can we do? For me, it was, when you read about this, the problem will be there's too many different recommendations, and you could kind of be confused. So I'm just going to give you three that I found most helpful. I think you'll find helpful. One is, it's always important to acknowledge the stress and the anxiety that we're feeling. And in our current situation, we have to acknowledge that we've been stressed for 3 years. And this stress has, for many of us, kind of transformed into tiredness and exhaustion. And it makes it hard to cope with yet another thing. I also have election-related stress. Last week, I was really anxious about the American election, but it turned out better than I thought. I'm really anxious about the war in Ukraine. But the one thing I think it's important for all of us to realize is that we've been stressed for 3 years because of the worst pandemic in the century. And we had to make a lot of adaptations. But most of us have found a way to be resilient, to, like the Cummings Center now does all of their events on Zoom, and they're highly skilled at it. And I think they're reaching a big audience, so they've made an adaptation. And I think in our own personal lives, we've made adaptation. Okay, the second thing that I recommend is when we are stressed, it's nice to have some everyday activities that are going to make you feel good about yourself and put you in a good frame of mind. And it's best to have activities that aren't too expensive, that don't really require a lot of setup. Something I started to do during the pandemic, and it was really helpful for me, is I became a jogger. Now, I shouldn't even call it jogging, because what I do is more like shuffling and rumbling and rambling. And I don't go very fast, but I go, and I was doing it every morning, and I listened to a recorded book as I do it, and it was a wonderful distraction, and uh, I think it was really helpful to me, and I think I should continue to do that during inflation, during this difficult time as well. The final thing, and this was really tricky during the pandemic, is the thing that helps us get through hard times are other people. And so we probably need to prioritize social connections. But I think we should stop and ask ourselves, okay, who are the people who help us feel more resilient, who help us kind of get in touch with our feelings and cope with our feelings? And I think we should prioritize spending time with the people who help us through these tough times. That doesn't mean that we end things with other people who maybe make us more panicky. But it's just that on balance, you want to make sure that some of the people who can calm you down and reassure you, the brainstorm, those are the ones that we should be talking to. Okay. So what else do I want to say? Oh, people sent in great questions. So one question was about coping strategies and mental health problems, and tried to address those. Another person wrote that every night when they check the stock market, they feel very uneasy and insecure, and that because of that, they're cutting back on things, and it makes them feel sad. And are these normal feelings? And I just want to say, yeah, that's really natural and normal. I think it's natural for me to be anxious about inflation. Now, one thing I try to do, and they recommend that this during the pandemic too, is you should kind of consider whether you're alarming yourself by checking the stock market every day. Maybe that's something you should check once a week, just like with pandemic cases and deaths. It's something that they do intermittently. And maybe do it at a certain time of day when you're feeling stronger. Another person wrote that they're losing their ability to sleep properly. They wake up almost hourly. How can you get back to your old sleep habits? And this is something I really can relate to. I find that when I'm having troubles with sleeping, it goes deeper than that and makes me kind of depressed. But I do have family history of depression, so I'm always watchful of that. So I think it is good to think about doing some of the things I mentioned before, so that we can find activities, find people who reassure us and get us grounded. But with sleep, it's good to have routines. During the pandemic, I was watching Schitt's Creek every evening. It's a very funny show about people who are up Schitt's Creek. So it was great to try to relate to that. Then I started watching Kim's Convenience, which was kind of an amusing, interesting story. And I like the idea of having something I could do each evening before I go to sleep that kind of cheers me up. That makes me feel good about unity and other things. So my biggest thing is that I'd like to end by saying, of course, we're a diverse group here, and our feelings about money and inflation will differ. It's a more pressing concern for some of us. But I think managing the anxiety, taking care of ourselves, and relying on others is something that's useful to everyone. And inflation, like the pandemic, is something that will probably get better. I'm still holding out hope that inflation was kind of tied to the pandemic and that we may get back to a more reasonable level. And even if we don't, I think we've shown that we're resilient and we can adjust, and that with the help of family, friends, and financial experts like Ron, we can get through this. Thank you very much. Okay, so otherwise,